Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Olivares, Director of Programming, welcoming you and members and non-members alike to today's virtual conversation, Banking on Security, the Future of Online Banking. If this is your first time to join us online, allow me to introduce Manila House. We are a private members club that opened in February 2017 with the aim of bringing together an assemblage of people from the business, creative, cultural, and intellectual communities who are drawn to each other by a shared interest to continuously learn about art, culture, food, business, politics, and from the diversity of their fellow members themselves. It is a community of curious, committed, and caring individuals, and it lives beyond the physical confines of the club. We began our webinar series in May 2020, covering and encouraging discussion about a range of topical issues from business and investment to health and wellness and art and culture. We have featured both local and international speakers and continue to broaden our reach among members and non-members alike. Our previous webinars are available for viewing on the Manila House YouTube channel. That said, for the non-members among us, you might like to consider membership to Manila House. We have a limited number of memberships still available. Please email membership@manilahouseinc.com for more information. Please also be informed that Manila House, in compliance with the allowable IATF and LGU capacities, is open for dine-in to fully vaccinated members and their guests. And our takeaway service is open to the public. Please call us on 0917-816-3685 to place your orders. We also have your Manila House favorites now available in frozen version, ready to heat in the comfort of your own home. So before we begin, just a few ground rules. The event is being recorded and will be up on the Manila House YouTube channel in a day or so. Please use the chat box and the Q&A box for any questions and comments, and we'll get to your questions as we go along. So let's get down to business. There's been a definite shift in the way we bank since the pandemic began, and online banking is now very much the way most of us bank today. But how safe is it? The recent scandal involving two of the most prominent local banks, BDO and Union Bank, in which 700 BDO accounts were hacked and unauthorized transfers were made to one particular Union Bank account holder and then allegedly used for cryptocurrency purchases, has made a lot of people nervous. So this is a kind of online fraud that we all worry about. So how do we restore confidence in the system? And how do we prevent this from happening again? So let me introduce today's speakers who are joining us in today's discussion about this very topic. We have Jose Arnulfo Wick Veloso, who is the president of Bankers Association of the Philippines, aside from being the CEO of the Philippine National Bank. Wick Veloso is the president and CEO of Philippine National Bank, or PNB, and the president of Bankers Association of the Philippines, BAP. He has had more than 30 years experience in banking and capital markets, garnering various industry recognitions throughout his career. Prior to PNB, he was the president and CEO of HSBC Philippines, and he was the first Filipino CEO in the bank's 244 years of operations in the country. After only a few months with Veloso at the helm, PNB showed significant turnaround in profit and strategy, growing by over 20% in total assets. By 2020, PNB was recognized by the Asian Banker as the best managed bank, and Veloso is the best CEO during its annual Leadership Achievement Awards. The bank earned the distinction for demonstrating excellence in its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Wick Veloso is committed to accelerating PNB's transformation through digital banking solutions that provide clients with a safer way of banking in the new normal. He is determined to have more collaborations with the government with the goal of supporting the Philippine economy and the road to recovery. Next up is Nicky Mapa, who is a senior economist with ING Manila. Nicky Mapa has several years of research experience in both the academe and the government, having worked as a researcher at the University of Asia and the Pacific for 2 years, and then at the Central Bank of the Philippines for 5 years. He transitioned to an economist role at the Treasury Department of the Bank of the Philippine Islands, a position he held for 6 years. At present, he is a senior economist at ING Manila, covering the Philippine and Indonesian markets under the ING Asia Pacific Research Desk. He holds a master's degree in industrial economics and a Bachelor of Arts in the Humanities from the University of Asia and the Pacific. Pursued further graduate study and completed a degree in MA Economics under scholarship from Vanderbilt University, where he graduated with distinction. He capped off his education in 2015 with a master's in business administration from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, also under scholarship. Also joining us today as moderator is Roby Alampay, a seasoned journalist and former editor of BusinessWorld. Former editor-in-chief, I should say, of BusinessWorld. He also anchored the nightly newscast of The Big Story on Bloomberg TV Philippines. He was one of 8 distinguished alumni of the University of the Philippines College of Mass Communication, honored in November 2017 as recipients of its first Glory Awards. The awardees were acknowledged for their outstanding work and influence in their chosen disciplines. A graduate of Columbia University School of Journalism, Robbie was recognized for his contributions to print and online journalism. Robbie is also now currently the man behind Puma Podcasts, which hosts and features a whole gamut of topics, podcasts on their own dedicated channel on Spotify and Apple. Okay, so now let me turn you over to, let me start with Nicky. Nicky will start off with a brief overview. So we've started a new year. We were all hopeful towards the end of the year, and then now with Omicron, we're like a little bit of a tizzy, so we don't know where we're actually going. So Nicky, maybe you can elaborate a little bit and tell us what we can expect for this year.
Hi, and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Nicky once again, and I'm here to give a brief outlook of what we expect in the coming year. I have a slide show presentation I'll be sharing with you. And here we go. Hopefully you can all see that. It's the title of my presentation is Recalculating. As Bambina noted, at the end of last year, we were all very hopeful for growth in 2022. And of course, we're now in the midst of another surge. That's definitely making us analysts, forcing us to recalculate what we were expecting in the coming months. So just wanted to, just do a review how it started, where are we at the present. This chart basically just shows us where the economy was prior to the pandemic. So showing you here gross domestic product in its peso values, and basically just wanted to, 2 things I want to highlight here. First is that prior to COVID, the Philippines was a 4.9 trillion peso economy. And because of COVID and the lockdowns, we got knocked down back to 3.9 trillion pesos. So whenever we talk about recovery, I think most of us are of the same opinion that we only recover once we get back to that starting level of 4.9 trillion pesos. And currently we're on pace to get back to that level by the end of this year. So slow and steady, of course, start and stop because of all the lockdowns. But eventually by the end of this year, 3rd or 4th quarter, we should be back at 4.9 trillion pesos here and back again to that level. How's it going? Well, in terms of growth, yes, we had that drop down to we fell by 17% at the height of the lockdowns. Of late, we've seen better growth numbers. A lot of it has to do with base effects, but also because we're starting to reopen the economy. So when we started this year, or at least when we ended last year, many analysts as well as the government very, very hopeful for, and they target now 7 to 9% GDP for this year. And several reasons why they think that it's going to be a good year. And my job today, what I wanted to do is go through all these different factors or different reasons why they're optimistic and see how well they hold up. Okay, so the first, the 3 reasons are here. Everyone expects 2022 to be a good year because it's an election year. It's always a good year. BSP governor saying, yeah, every election year you get about a percentage point increase from the baseline average during non-election years. So let's see how that holds up. Secondly is revenge spending. And they say revenge spending will deliver really strong growth. Is that a plausible theory or expectation? And third is vaccination and fundamentals will carry the Philippines to 7 to 9% growth. So let's go through each of them one by one and see how they hold up. Well, the first is, do election years actually see a bump up in spending? And the short answer to that is yes. And it's very easy to see from this chart. Very busy, but let's just focus on that orange line that just shows you GDP growth across time. And I've sort of highlighted with stars the years that we see presidential election years. And just by eyeballing it, you can see, 2004, 2010, and 2016, in general, growth has been a bit faster than non-presidential election years. So, but where's it coming from? And this is where the bars that I'm showing you here sort of tell us. And basically, I'll summarize it. I'll say that growth generally comes from consumption. And this is something that we sort of know. During election years, more money changing hands. Growth can be expected to be faster, or GDP can be expected to be higher. But very interestingly, I wanted to point out other facets of an election year. The second is capital formation is actually one of the second strongest contributor to growth during an election year. Yes, it's consumption, but to a more substantial, surprisingly extent, it's also capital formation or investments, construction in particular. So, and this is usually front loaded in the first half, in particular the first quarter of the year. This is a lot of DPWH projects maybe going out. Politicians trying to get their infrastructure project out before the election. They do a ribbon cutting. They have a nice picture, photo up, so that they can, paste it on a tarp when they run for re-election. I don't know, but in general, it's public construction, the second largest contributor to growth. Will we have that this year? Not sure, because we have Omicron. But yeah, if that continues, then we can expect good growth in the third quarter. The third thing that I wanted to point out about election years is that government spending actually dips off, and this is reminiscent of every election year. At the first half of the year, it's okay. The second half, it's not great. It's usually lower on average for those 3 years. And the reason why, it's very easy, or maybe we can surmise that, you have a new cabinet coming in. So they're still learning the ropes. They bring in new people. They don't generally get things, they don't hit the ground running, basically. So what happens is you see a drop off in government spending. Over the past 2 years, government spending has been supporting growth in the Philippines. So all of a sudden, if you lose that, that generally leads to very substantial drop-offs in the growth rates. So yes, it's going to be a good year in terms of, because it's an election year, you have consumption. Two wild cards there. One is, will public construction continue this quarter? And the other wild card there is, how will government spending look in the second half of this year, because it's an election year. How about revenge spending? Will this carry GDP? And for the most part, yes, revenge spending has come back with a vengeance, especially in the second half of last year. So third quarter, after Delta wave, people came out, right? And if you look at the GDP numbers, a surprising print, 7.1%, better than expected. And one of the main drivers for this was consumption, and in particular, consumption for restaurants and hotels and leisure. So even if we had Delta, there were some areas that weren't under lockdown. So I guess the Visayas, people would go to vacation over there. And then more so in the fourth quarter, you don't have to, do all these fancy modeling, but I'm sure you just look at social media, you could have been out during December when cases were down and people were out, and it really felt like a Christmas again, at least for me. And revenge spending was back in play. So hotels were full, Boracay was full, restaurants were full again. So, but is that going to happen all the time, right? But I wanted to say is, we can't all go to Bora all the time. So if we went to Bora in the third quarter or the fourth quarter of last year, not everyone's going to go to Bora in the first, second, and third quarter again this year. So if you had some element of a revenge spending that came out, I'm unsure that it is sustainable for the entire year of this year. And mainly that's because people who have splurged late last year, are probably going to be saving once again. And this is what tells me, this chart tells me why that's going to be. So unemployment is still quite elevated. Yes, it's improved from the worst of it, which was mid last year. 16.6% unemployment. Now it's about 7%. But if you compare it to pre-pandemic average, that's 5.5. So you're about 2 percentage point off, which translates to about 900,000 Filipinos still without a job. Secondly, even if your unemployment numbers are improving, your underemployment numbers are not. So this tells you that people have jobs, and this is to be expected because we're working partial capacity. So let's say you used to work 20 hours, but because of the partial lockdowns, you only get to work 10. So you feel you're underemployed, and this shows up in the numbers. You're underemployed, you don't earn as much as you used to. You probably won't be spending as much as you used to also. So some other things that I wanted to highlight is that, yes, consumption has carried us through the past 2 years. And one very important number that I want to show you is that even if bank lending was negative, and bank lending was negative throughout most of the pandemic, and this can be expected because of the downturn in economic activity. But one of the few lending segments that were actually positive was salary loans. And this is because people are able to access, banks are able to give out salary loans, helping support consumption. That's actually on the downtrend right now. And if we expect central banks here and around the world to be hiking rates, we can expect this number to actually continue to head south. So if we lose that support, the salary loans, I'm not sure how consumption will look going forward. One other thing, revenge spending probably doesn't translate to everything, right? So if you revenge spend on travel or restaurants, it doesn't necessarily go to everything in the basket. And one thing I wanted to highlight here is car sales. So car sales for me is a good proxy of households' ability to invest, right? So if you have money, you have income, steady income, you have savings, you can get a car. Car sales used to average about 32,000 right before COVID. Now it's averaging about 20. So we're off about 10 to 12,000 units a month, right? So this tells us that, yes, maybe some people are back on their feet, but it also tells us that we're not anywhere close to where we were prior to the pandemic. So once again, revenge spending doesn't necessarily translate to everything. So those two things, I'm still a bit iffy. Yes, to some extent, we can expect it. However, not going to be the same, that most people are expecting. And third is vaccination and fundamentals will carry us through. I think Omicron has taught us maybe a bit of, forced us to have a little humility as we start the year. We expected that, okay, but we have vaccinations, herd immunity, okay na to. Even if vaccination rates in the Philippines are 50%, still quite low, but improving from the lows, Omicron has been able to result in breakthrough infections. So people who have been fully vaxxed, who have actually been boosted, still get sick. And even if it's not as severe, and thank God the symptoms aren't as severe, it's still very, very disruptive. I mean, you force people to stay at home for about a month. And when the infections happen, it usually takes down the entire household. So you got people knocked out of commission for a week or two, and that's very disruptive. And one thing I wanted to highlight, maybe the hit doesn't necessarily happen to spending, although I think in January, everyone pretty much just stayed home. It's going to affect business sentiment and consumer sentiment. And showing you here measures or surveys conducted by the BSP. And basically, I just wanted to highlight that every single time that we went into some form of lockdown or into a wave, there was some corresponding reaction in terms of spending on the consumer side as well as the business sentiment. So we can probably expect the same this year. Basically, short end of it is that, one thing that we've learned throughout this pandemic is that we can't be sure about anything. So maybe there's another variant, God forbid, but we don't know, and that's one thing that we have to sort of accept. In terms of growth, one thing I wanted to just point out is that, yes, we're going to see a better year, and last year we actually had quite a decent year. However, we're still not going to be at the pace of expansion prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, growth in the Philippines 6%. You can book that every single year, 6. After COVID, at least for now, growth will average about 4.5 to about 5% over the next few years. Some of the things I wanted to touch on, inflation, maybe not such a hot topic here, but for the most part, inflation was above target, was quite high last year. Several things here, African swine fever, Fuel prices are going crazy. This year should be a bit better, but a lot to do with base effects. Yeah. So, and going forward, yeah, liquidity, I can skip this. Let's go straight to this number here, dollar peso. It's a very informative chart. Basically, I'm showing you two things here. Dollar peso is the blue line, and those little narrow and thin columns is the current account. And included in the current account, you have remittances and the trade balance. And basically, it's a very straightforward relationship. When this current account, when more dollars are coming into the country, you tend to have a strong currency. And when that number turns negative, whenever more dollars are leaving the country, you tend to see a weaker currency. So 2020, more dollars coming in because we weren't importing anything. Dollar peso moved south, or the peso strengthened. 2021 was the exact opposite. We started importing more things because we were reopening, and dollar peso weakened. I think this year it's going to take a different tact, and basically it's because of this this development. You see the Fed is about to hike interest rates, and hike interest rates rather aggressively. Whenever they tend to do that, most central banks around the world usually react by hiking their interest rate as well to maintain interest rate differentials. Basically, if the Fed is going to hike this year and the BSP is sounding like they don't want to hike, just taking it from the most recent episode where that happened, where the Fed was hiking and the BSP wasn't hiking, you tend to see a very weak currency. And that's when we saw the peso move from about 50 to 54 in a matter of months. So if the BSP continues to say, we won't hike, while the Fed is saying, we're going to hike, we could see a weaker currency this year. So all depends on where the BSP takes us. But yeah, this is something that we have to watch out for. Certain things that keep me up at night, although many things keep me up at night. These are just the things I wanted to share. One thing I wanted to highlight is that the world economy is doing a bit better. Yes, the US is doing great. But China, I feel, is going through some trouble, right? All central banks around the world, or most of them, are hiking rates because their economies are doing better. China is the only central bank, at least the only major central bank, that's cutting policy rates. And whenever you have a central bank cutting policy rates, you know their economy isn't doing well. So that doesn't bode well, I feel, for global growth when you have the world's largest economy, the US, doing okay, but China's not doing so well. Something to think about. Second, yeah, so the US economy is going red hot. It's growing very rapidly. Biden with all his fiscal spending, and the Fed with all their accommodation. But the Great Resignation, this is when all the US workers say, we don't want to work anymore. Let's just get all the free unemployment benefits. Tight labor conditions are pushing up wages in the US and also pushing up inflation in the US. That's actually not going to be good for countries like the Philippines, in the sense that this will lead to interest rates being increased in the US. And whenever you have the US hiking interest rates, if you don't hike interest rates, I think we talked about it earlier, it tends to lead to a weaker currency. That's so 2020. If you remember, at the height of the pandemic, we could always play it's a pandemic, you can't do anything to us. You can't downgrade us. You can't you can't say anything bad about the Philippines, how we're running things, because we're in a pandemic. But now it's 2022 and we're doing a bit better. So you can't play that card anymore. So this is with regard to credit ratings downgrades, but maybe that's something that we can just take in passing. And the last thing that keeps me up at night is a messy election, right? Still early in the game. I'm actually not looking at the surveys just yet. I think it's way too early. But if there's anything that we don't need right now, amidst all this economic sort of recalculating, it's a messy election. And if we see what happened in the US, very polarized. It's a very polarized situation, and it feels the same way here. And let's say one candidate wins, one candidate doesn't win. How do we react as a people? How does that affect the economy going forward? So just these things that keep me up at night. I'm just going to close off here with my projections. Basically, this is just telling us that growth is going to be good this year. It's an election year, but maybe just have to tone down the expectations, not the 7 to 9 that the government is looking for. Inflation should sort of improve this year from about 4.5 last year, now to about 3.6, 3.5 this year. BSP not expected to change interest rates just yet, although I think they're going to have to increase interest rates eventually, maybe by the second quarter. And dollar peso will eventually start to weaken. We're already starting to feel that. And this is mainly because the Fed is hiking policy rates. So yeah, just reminding everyone to do your thing. We just started the year, so this can always change. But thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Nicky. Thank you for that. That was like really comprehensive and slightly optimistic, slightly pessimistic. So let's see where we go throughout the year. But I guess it was a kind of like very candid assessment of where we are at this moment in time, right? I think so. With that as our kind of like basis, we go on over to Wick Veloso, who will zero in on bank security, which is something that concerns all of us today. And especially now with everything that you were talking about, all the, all the upheavals and in the market and everything, how safe is your money in the bank, right? So Wick, over to you. Oops, I'll have to unmute you. Yeah.
There you go. Good day, everyone. Thank you so much, Bambina. Technology in daily lives by introducing innovative methods that were considered unthinkable before. For instance, teachers can teach their students online. I'm on slide 3. The situation is, something very interesting. I visit my granddaughters and I see them in front of a tablet, and right there and then is the classroom. And I try to play with her by showing my face in the camera, and she tries to hide. And clearly, the classmates get to enjoy. It's as if they're still in the same classroom. And I was telling myself, my God, this is a very, different scenario from how it was when I was growing up. The same way, I had my executive checkup. I went to the hospital to have my executive checkup. Told me after a couple of days, they're going to have my doctor consult me. Lo and behold, on my desktop, the doctor scheduled an appointment, showed me everything that I needed to see and be able to do so within the confines of my home at my designated time, at everyone's convenience. And clearly, these are things that allows us now to say, wow, we are moving to the next generation. The Filipinos now have the option to apply for loans, savings accounts, credit cards online. Significantly easier to send money and pay monthly bills compared to the past. The technological disruption in the banking industry we're seeing today presents a golden opportunity to promote financial inclusion in the Philippines, given financial services today are more accessible to the Filipino people. And this is where I get excited because the national ID system is going to be rolled out. See, the national ID system will allow each and every Filipino to fast track the account opening. And not only will it fast track the account opening, it will now allow us to have a credit score for Juan de la Cruz in the remote areas which we're unable to reach in the past and only being accessed by the informal lenders. You see, there are countless benefits to promoting financial inclusion. One such benefit now is that Filipinos can open a bank account where they can. Okay? According to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the number of basic deposit accounts in the first quarter of 2021 grew by 51% on a year-over-year basis to 7 million. much work needs to be done. And it's imperative for all stakeholders to work together and ensure that this critical growth puts all Filipinos on a path towards achieving financial independence. When I say much is to be done, okay, you go to an advanced economy and ask if there is a way for you in Japan, in Singapore, in the United States to get an ID. So if you're in the UK right now, Bambina, ask, where can I get a fake driver's license? Where can I get a fake SSS card? Okay. Programmers who thought of onboarding customers without the benefit. You see, part of this, mobile banking experience is the ability to onboard by just using your mobile phone. Use your mobile phone, you're able to onboard yourself. One of the things that we're unable to, really have a grasp on is in the Philippines, there's such a thing as a recto ID. Things that sound so bizarre in advanced economies. Unfortunately, they are the ones that are in the forefront of developing these technologies. So they need to know that there are still places in the world where you can have this kind of challenges. There are hiccups that could prevent us from achieving universal financial inclusion. One paradox we face is that the same technological disruption that has provided countless benefits to Filipinos for their banking needs is now being used against its intended purpose. Based on complaints filed with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the amount of financial losses the Filipino public suffered in the last 2 years amounted to 2 billion. It's good these numbers came from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, because from where we come from, the Bankers Association of the Philippines, it's a guesstimate. Okay? What concerns us as the caretakers of the country's hard-earned money is more than 40,000 cybercrime-related complaints were filed by consumers with the BSP between 2020 and 2021. Okay, let me just check each and every one of you, especially those that are always being visible. So Nicky, you check if you have social media, you check Facebook. You may probably have numerous Facebook accounts that are not necessarily yours. You may have, you just double check. You probably will be surprised. Okay, so those that are usually out there being familiar with the public are often the targets. Let me share with you. The security caretaker of our institution is able to track down 175 fake accounts, okay, of mine. My face, different name. My name, different face. Okay, they'll have a fake passport as an ID. So these are the challenges that we face. This is why the Bankers Association of the Philippines launched its Cyber Safe campaign last year. The educational campaign supplements BP member banks' undertaking to promote cybersecurity, such as the regular upgrading of their security systems and raising awareness among their clients on the different forms of cybercrime. The Cyber Safe campaign is being held in partnership with various allies such as the Department of Justice, the media, and social influencers. The campaign is the banking industry's collective effort in stepping up its game and doing its part to promote cybersecurity and stop cybercrime. You see, if you happen to have a car accident, the police is very familiar to take your, to go to the uh, accident scene of the accident. They're going to come up with a police report. They're going to be able to have this submitted to the fiscal. The fiscal is able to come up with a basis for someone to be filed a case against the court if you're unwilling to settle. Very easy. People are very familiar with that. We are working with the Department of Justice because the Department of Justice is the overall agency in charge and ensuring that the National Bureau of Investigation, the Philippine National Police, okay, are able to put the cyber criminals in jail, which is what we really want to happen. Unfortunately, they are not yet still in a, we are not yet in a position to say that this is something we can be comfortable with. If you are hypothetically in a far-flung area, I'm just inventing a place. You are in Pagudpud and you experience cybercrime while having a vacation. You have to go to the Philippine National Police Cybercrime Office in Camp Crame, the Department of Justice Office in Malate, or the National Bureau of Investigation Office in Taft Avenue. You go to the police, they are not well versed on what are the cases to be filed against the individual. So what we are working on with the Department of Justice is to enhance the training of our law enforcement agencies. Wherever you are, you'll now be able to file a case because our objective is to put someone behind bars. All of them locally are just so happy because we have not yet seen in the paper someone doing this kind of crime, okay, being put behind bars. Looking further ahead, an exciting future of banking awaits us. Faced with changing customer expectations and emerging technologies, the future may look different from what it is today. In dealing with the opportunities and challenges this brings us, we continue to do what we do best, ensuring a cyber-safe environment for the banking industry and the public. We at the Bankers Association of the Philippines are encouraging sharing. Okay, Bank A, what have you experienced? So we know that this is the modus operandi. The constant sharing allow us to be more familiar, encouraging to further improve the systems, technology, safety of member banks. Okay, is highly encouraged. So if you hear of a new security platform, it is now highly encouraged. You see, one of the challenges in the dark world is that there are individuals who doesn't really want to do it for the money. They're not really there to ask for a sum of money. But in the dark world, somebody will be able to say, I was able to get into the Manila House private club system. Okay, check the, alter the membership of the club or get the information of the members or so on and so forth. And that becomes a bragging right. In the dark world, the bragging right is much more important than the financial transaction that they do get. I'm much more worried about those in the dark web that just wants to have the bragging rights. Okay, they have the capability to do something significantly, okay, disastrous to somebody else. But those that do those petty crimes, they're a dime a dozen. I'm not saying that they're not a threat, but those that really want their reputation to be popular in the dark web are really in there to make their names very, very popular. So our objective is to put them behind bars because this is the future of banking. The future of banking is not only the ability to open an account without the need to go to a bank. Sooner, some bank will allow you a virtual tour of a branch, virtual tour of a bank, as if you're entering the bank, interacting with everyone, either in loans department, trade department, deposit, by using technology. The use of the national ID system will now allow us to know the credit score of Juan de la Cruz. Juan de la Cruz, once his credit score is established, will be able to have the ability to borrow. And that is good because now it is a case where they are no longer beholden to the informal lenders, but they are now going to be embraced by the formal banking system. Technology will allow me to be able to go straight to someone selling their merchandise without the need to go to the market. I was sharing earlier, I was, in the short period of time that I was, waiting for my turn, I was able to purchase online. Can you imagine? Sometimes I ask myself, do I really need this, or is it because it is just there available online and I'm tempted, I just want to try it, okay? By a few clicks, within a few seconds, bingo. Transaction is done, it's going to be delivered. Actually, it's the youngsters that, started all of this. I was wondering, how come when I leave when I exit the master's bedroom, in the different doors of the house, especially when the kids were not yet married, I see boxes. I was just, what the hell's going on here? Why are there boxes? And some of the boxes are being returned. I was wondering, boxes coming in, I go to the office, driver brings boxes with them to be delivered to the same, delivery shop. And these boxes apparently were online shop. They talk about 11/11. We're in a family dinner, very excited. All the kids, okay, together with the wife, have their own language. They have their own lingo. Apparently, there's a sale ongoing very soon, and they just want to make sure that they can already focus what are the things that they'll be able to lay their hands on before everyone else, okay, gets to have it. So more and more, okay, of the technology is in need of security. So it is our duty to protect our customers by making sure that we search for the best security for the banking system, share it with the other banks, and hopefully be able to work together. And after all, our financial future and safety lies in the cybersecurity measures we build and foster today. I'll be very happy to answer any question that the audience would like to throw from here. Thank you. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, Wick, for that. I'm going to turn you over now to Robbie, who's going to moderate a brief discussion. And then any questions from the audience, I think we have some questions already coming in. We'll get to them. Robbie, and can we move to gallery view?
Are we in gallery view now?
I think so. Go ahead, Robbie.
Okay. Hi, thanks, Pambina. Thanks to Manila House for having me. Thanks also to Nicky and and Wick for their presentations, really giving us a good background, not just on online banking, but also on the economy in general. That said, it is a webinar about online banking and on safety. I want to seize on that to talk about the cyber safe campaign that you have, Wick. No, I'll start off also just to get something out of the way, which is really one of the things I bet that got a lot of people interested in this. Really, you talked about one real objective is, let's make an example of someone. And I agree, that's one of the biggest disincentives to cybercrime and to securing and building confidence for the entire system. So let's make an example of someone. Our first question from Michael Kepler is actually, I think, related to this. It's a different bank, but very similar modus to what we discussed in the promotions for this webinar. Maybe let's start just by asking in terms of making an example of someone, and then maybe let's use that as an example to illustrate the infrastructure we have, the behaviors that people have, our access to, let's call it first aid, in case you are aggrieved, all the way to how our systems work. Maybe give us an update on Mark Nagoyo, what happened with BDO and Union Bank. We do know, I have to say, no, we're not asking you to say anything that you're not allowed to say. Let me also say it on your behalf. BSP has said they will come out with their findings by the end of this month. But if you were to take that example last December, what did that show us in terms of our behavior, in terms of our vulnerabilities, and in terms of our knowledge and access to remedies?
Robbie, thank you. Is it technical sub judice, meaning it's something that the regulator is reviewing? I'm not privy to the actual details of what happened, but one thing is certain: those that are in the financial system now realize the threat to the brand, the threat to the customers, and the importance to ensure that we continue to review the security protocols of the banks. Two, the communication to customers is never ending. The communication to customers that we are not going to ask you to update your account, nor threaten you that your account will be closed if you don't answer these important questions, which are out of nowhere. You get a call that a transaction transpired, and they're asking you out of nowhere, Bambina, can you update your credit card details? Okay, because your account is under threat. We need to constantly communicate. And if there is one thing that we would like to encourage, especially to those that are doing mobile banking, okay, for the safety, for your convenience, we encourage you to have a main account and have a sub account. The sub account allow you to be able to have the ability to do the online transactions within what you're prepared, okay, to actually transact. So you don't have your full account exposed. Now, as far as what we in the financial system is doing, or the banking system, to ensure that the financial system is safe, the onboarding of clients is very important. If Roby Alampay opens an account and all of a sudden says that I want 10 accounts, I should have, instead of me being happy that I'll have all of a sudden have 10 accounts being opened, I should be curious. Alarm bells should ring and say, why is Roby asking for 10 banking accounts? Okay, and what are the identification that is being provided? Now, how sure am I that this identification is safe and secure? So for those that are onboarding or making their customer experience perfect, seamless, and would like to onboard customers without the need to go to the bank, only by submitting their papers, documents, everything to the phone, just make sure it's so secure. Just make sure that when identification papers are submitted, that you have the ability to validate and verify. because that is the only way you can protect yourself. Okay, the future, okay, will always be into this new technology. Banks will continue to make sure that you're protected and safe. But as we continue to do that, you have to remember that these bad actors also want to continue researching, finding out new ways to be able to get into you. That, I'd like to highlight, there is this House Bill 9615, the cyber account or cybersecurity law that now criminalizes phishing and now makes it a criminal act to do cybercrime. We are asking Congress to fast track the passage of this bill. So we now, put all of these hackers, those that are involved in cybercrime, those that have fake accounts, those that have mule accounts, okay, be considered a criminal and therefore be charged criminally and not only civil cases.
Okay. Nicky, I wanted to ask you also something about, we talked about the economy in general and Filipinos and our welfare in general. I also wanted to establish something fundamental here. We're talking about online security and online banking, but fundamentally what we really want is financial inclusion. Now, we talked about the number of how substantially formal deposits have gone up. But in terms of inclusion in e-commerce and in the digital economy, I'm wondering, without a formal bank account, e-wallets, and so on, and all of these apps that allow people to transact, does that count as inclusion? Do those people essentially get counted as banked now? I guess my question is also, obviously, over the course of this pandemic, a lot of people were either forced or finally discovered the conveniences of online transaction and online access and inclusion over the course of the pandemic, not just counting the formal deposits. How many Filipinos more were included in the digital economy? Can we track that? And how important is that to all our objectives?
I won't have the actual number. I think the BSP would probably be a better source for that. But I think if there's anything that this pandemic has done, it's really hastened the, by necessity, people to really switch over to the digital sphere, in the sense that all these transactions now are done on the web. Yeah, the old metric, of course, was how many people have bank accounts. But yeah, it's interesting that you pointed out that maybe they don't necessarily just have to have a formal bank account, but perhaps they are also included in financial inclusion if they have some form of e-wallet. But that's still very different. A saved stored value card or stored value mechanism is still very different from owning a bank account. Given that the bank accounts do have your PDIC protection as well as the KYC requirements. So still a very different. I think a very good example is GCash or any of the other platforms. There's a GCash account and there's a GCash verified account, which is that goes through the general KYC process as well. So yes, they're at least they're taking one step closer to being, I feel, formally in the counted as banked. But yeah, this pandemic has definitely hastened that process.
Yeah, but Wick, maybe you have a take on this or something to add in terms of cybersecurity. Basically, all in all, I know it's a more technical question, but in terms of cybersecurity and bringing up the confidence of people, not just in banks, but in the digital economy in general, does the CyberSafe campaign encompass all of this, everybody that's in the digital economy? And I think, of course, not just of older people who are finally finding the convenience of online banking, but even people who had to open digital wallets to receive ayuda. For example, I mean, that's a huge amount of people, a lot of them unbanked. Do our campaigns cover that as well? And do you make that distinction?
You see, Robbie, that's a very good point. We need to cover everything because each and every part of those transactions are part and parcel of the overall financial business that our customers are doing. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas also is supporting the open finance framework. So what does that mean? You have an account with Bank A for time deposit. You have an account with Equity Brokerage B for equity transactions. You have an account with Bank C for fixed income transactions. Everything can be now put together in one dashboard that allow you to find out what is the total, okay, investment of Juan de la Cruz in a page. That requires security. That requires the ability to put information from one financial institution to the other, to the confines, okay, of a single dashboard. And that is where we're headed. That's the direction that the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is opening us, to prepare us, to allow the convenience. So now you don't have to go and visit each and every financial institution. You just take a look at your overall exposure. Investments, loans, suma total, this is my net worth. Coming from this. So our objective is to make sure you cover everything.
Okay.
So we are going to, in the next few weeks, we continue to hear out more and more of this coming from influencers. We've realized that social media is a bigger platform and that we're going to use that to allow a broader reach.
Wick, kanina I can certainly relate, as I'm sure a lot of people here. Every time I go out, I see boxes also on our kitchen counter. Every time I see that, I just think myself, oh, that's the credit history of my son and daughter starting to grow. Or maybe it's my credit history. Every month I realize it's my credit history that's growing. But on a more serious note, I did want to ask about the behavior of people right now. We talk about a lot of people now participating in the digital economy, but I imagine a lot of that is just for transactions, these boxes, whatever these boxes represent, whether they're selling or they're buying. But we also talked about access to credit. And for that matter, building up the credit history of people. Can we track at which transactions people are really more confident right now and where they are still not confident, let's say in taking out loans, for example?
Let me share with you. The market right now, the banks, the financial market right now are very much focused in preparing themselves to the asset side, to the lending part of the digital business, because that's where you make money. The payment side doesn't really give you that much. Allows you to have Juan de la Cruz be interested to bank with you, but you don't really make money there. You make money by credit, okay, or by granting credit. But before you can grant credit and you just use technology, you need proper information, right data science, right establishment of the proper questions to ask. Build it over a period of time. Okay, let me share with you. I was in Vietnam to understand how this works. When you go to a two-wheeler shop, you are no longer faced by a Kawasaki or Honda or a Suzuki salesperson. The finance company person is there. So asks you, Mr. Roby Alampay, are you a resident of Ho Chi Minh? If the answer is yes, oh sir, very good. Okay, that means that if you are qualified, you can walk away with this two-wheeler now. Can you share with me your national ID? So Robbie shares 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, puts it in the tablet. In a few seconds, Robbie is clear, and they will tell you, sir, which color are you interested with? Now you've started your first secured, okay, borrowing journey. After 6 months, Robbie is going to be offered a credit card. So half
For my children.
transactional for your children, half transactional, half clean borrowing. You're able to pay on time within the next 6 months. After 6 months, this is a game changer. You are now going to be offered cash loans, multiple amounts. And that is what you'll now be able to use to start a business, to have your house repaired, and so on and so forth. But before you're able to do that, you have data scientists, data experts who gather based on the information where the NPLs come from, how they rise, and how they establish. Non-performing loans rose. The last time we had a flooding, those that were living beside the river had cases of increased NPL. So they'll change now their policy. If your address now says that you are within X amount near a river, your ability to borrow will decrease. So, that's how all the information are being processed. So we are headed towards that direction. Actually, there are more, if I may say, fintech companies operating in such manner. And that is why the banks should really fast track their ability to do this new customer experience.
Yeah, Nicky, Wick was talking about how this is going to be a game changer once we start to be able to build up a credit history of people. But could you take that to a macro level, at the individual level, especially for a country with a lot of MSMEs? I think we can all picture how empowering that can be. But on a macro level, I know that in the banking sector and in national economic discussions in general, it's always been talked about. But one of the constraints here in the Philippines is really access to credit. I've heard it said even by big businessmen that you don't really get credit here unless you have property or land. But how much of a game changer is that going to be once we're able to build up the credit histories of individuals on a national level?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right before the pandemic, the Philippines strung together one of its most impressive growth streaks, above 6% growth starting 2014, I think. So just a string of really, really strong growth. And what was behind that sort of resurgence or really strong pickup in GDP? Yes, it was consumption, which is something we all know, but it was actually capital formation or investments, right? And it's when we start to see people, when let's say the middle class or a sort of segment in the middle class, once they were able to access credit, this opened up a whole different, it was a game changer in that they were able to invest in automobiles, durable goods, housing. These things were probably not very available in the past, right? And when you make that available, especially with the ability to share credit information, on top of it, being able to open it up to more people, so you're expanding your market. You're also ensuring that because of the credit scoring, banks are able to discern, right? Do we give credit to this guy, or how much credit are we willing to give to this guy? The quality also of the lending also improves. So one thing that we saw prior to the pandemic, when growth was really good, was because investments were kicked off by car loans, housing loans, and then from there, I always say that this type of investment is the first level of capital formation. Because when firms start to see that, hey, consumers have the incomes, they have the ability, they're buying cars now, they're buying houses now, they're able to set aside a little more money for, let's say, consuming even more, right? Because you free up a whole lot of income when you have credit. It really is the ability of credit is the ability that bridges that gap. And there's a lot of literature on this. Fernando de Soto, all talking about credit and its ability to empower. And this is great on the macro level as well. It's getting people access to money and people who deserve it. Because that's what the credit score is for. And that can really open up doors for consumption as well as capital formation or investment.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to remind everybody that's watching, you can send your questions. We do have a space here, so you can fill in your questions here. We'll try to catch that along with the moderators. They'll feed that to me via chat. I'd like to, in fact, I combine two questions here. I think they're both related, it's safe to say, from Alfredo Parungao and GC Cat. Mr. Parungao says, Mr. Veloso, how safe are bank accounts that are being kept in banks that offer online banking? What safeguards should be undertaken? And I think related to this, GC Cat is asking, everything, all the horror stories we hear, everything from rogue employees. So it's not even a technological question. The rogue employees were able to create fictitious accounts, questions about the KYC system. People certainly asked that of Union Bank. They were trying to clarify, how did that happen? If it's a fictitious name, then how is it possible that this fictitious name is used for a transfer of a bank account? The banks have explained that, but I guess the general question to you from both GC Cat and Alfredo Parungao is that how safe is everything, and what can you tell us about the infrastructure in place, not just on the national level, not just at the BSP level, but also, let's be honest, about what banks have already invested in over the past decade.
Okay, let me separate two items, Robbie, and thanks, Fred and G for the question. First, how safe are the accounts? It is our duty to ensure that all accounts that are kept with us are safe. The value of the information, the secrecy of the information is, very important to us. So, we ensure that not only do we have the security, security protocol to ensure that someone is not going to be able to just get and check the accounts. We are making sure that we have our own environment protected, that nobody from the outside is going to penetrate. So inside and outside, you who are not supposed to be covering the account should not and will not be able to see what is in the account. Anything that will allow you, or we find out that you're trying to get access, there will be bells, okay, and whistle sounding, alarm sounding. Someone's trying to check someone. There'll be a lot of questions, believe me. So there's really more urban legend about this kind of stories about that being so easy for you to check. Okay. Second, onboarding. Now, I do not want to comment on any financial institution. Proper onboarding require you to do a due diligence, a KYC. Establishment of who Robbie Alampay is. What identification are you able to get? How did you validate his existence? How did you validate and ensure he is the real person that is applying? Okay, and that is why in some financial institutions, even if you say you have online account opening, they still are not reliant on just plain mobile phone. You have a mobile phone, but you still have a Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, and whatever telecommunication facility that allows recording. And we get, okay, your concurrence to be recorded because that's part of our file. So now we'll be able to say, I'm definitely sure this Robbie Alampay, who we are onboarding, is the right Robbie Alampay who claims to be in this business, that is in the business that is acceptable within our risk appetite.
Mm. Where are the weaknesses at this point, and which is the biggest concern? Is it technology? Is it still human behavior on the consumer side? Are we more vulnerable to gaps in policy? Are there still policy loopholes? I imagine there are still policy loopholes. But where are the particular areas that you would think not only the BSP but the public in general still have to be more conscious of, and still have to understand that there are still some things to be fixed in?
As I've shared earlier, even if banks, financial institutions continue to improve their security protocol, others will still try to break. And primarily because they want to break is not for financial reasons, but more for their prestige in the dark web. That's why we constantly get a lot of security information that there's a break-in, and more often than not, okay, before they can even do the next thing, that's being easily captured by our security protocols. Now come your own internal policies within the financial institution. Each financial institution should have a clear policy ensuring that only those that are allowed to have access to information of Robbie be allowed to have access. That is the only way for you to be able to protect.
Okay.
Can I just
Robina?
say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Robina.
Just wanted to ask Nicky, ING is completely online, right? Is it the first such bank in the Philippines? I mean, obviously ING is an international bank, but it's the first such bank to be completely online in the country. Am I right in saying that?
That I'm aware of, yes. I think
Yeah. So do you have to also go through those controls, like the voice recognition thing, and then like when you have to do a photo, right? Like when you have to with your app, right? When
Yeah,
when you're applying for it, yeah, there are all these security measures, right,
all the
built in.
KYC still,
Yeah.
we still comply with all the KYC requirements, but it's just
And then
done through a different medium.
how do people, I mean, maybe this is a stupid question, but how do they'll have to transfer the money to their newly opened account in a different way because you don't have over-the-counter services.
Yeah, we do that via check deposit through pictures. So you take a online picture of, let's say, the check to yourself, which funds your initial deposit. Yeah, so everything's done. Yeah, we don't have a branch, no brick and mortar. So you just take a photo of the front and
so
the
you
back
don't
of the
have
check.
to receive the check, then you have to do the interbank thing then, sorry, I don't know the terminology, to clear that check then through
we do that for them.
Yeah. Okay.
For the
Yeah,
consumer,
so
it's just
quite revolutionary for the Philippines, right? I mean, I went through that in the UK, so it was also quite new for me, but yeah. But for the Philippines, where it's quite traditional still, the way people bank, right? That's quite, I would say that's quite revolutionary. Can I ask one more question before
Go
I
ahead.
give to you, Robbie, to close? I just wanted to ask on an international level, though. We're talking about with the imminent threat of war in the Ukraine, right? Of Russian invasion and all that. There are threats for sanctions, and those include disconnecting Russia from the SWIFT system. How does that all relate to online banking across borders, and how will that impact I suppose, maybe the world economy than our economy eventually. Anyone?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I thought it's a question for Robbie. I misunderstood.
No. For any one of you, no. How the SWIFT, like removing Russia, for example, as part of the sanctions from the SWIFT system, the banking system, internationally, how would that affect online banking? Would you have more rogue elements maybe now trying to, steal money, cyber crimes, trying to extract money because now Russia's been cut off from the SWIFT system? And how would it impact the world economy and eventually the Philippines?
Let me take that question. SWIFT is an international fund transfer transaction between two financial institutions. It's a highway. Okay, if you have a SWIFT account, okay, all I need to do is have your number and be able to effect transfer immediately. It's a highway. MT-01, MT-02, those are codes for you to be able to efficiently transfer. So imagine that if your highway is closed for transactions, and I don't want to comment, is it political in nature? Is it because you're a haven of what do you call this, cyber criminals and the like? I don't want to comment on that. But the moment it's closed, you're punishing the economic, participants, because economic activity will slow down. So how do you want me to pay? You want me to pay via demand draft, and you'll wait for 21 days for it to be cleared? Okay, holy Moses, so nobody's going to deal with you. So how do you want me to execute a transaction? You want me to airlift cash to you? The smallest amount of cash you gather makes you a suspicious transaction. Why are you handling so much cash? So the mere fact that you're cut from a payment system is going to cripple you, cripple your economy, cripple everyone else.
This just reminds me, Wick, of another question you mentioned kanina. The real concern is not yung mga kukupit-kupit sa mga accounts natin. The real concern, as you said, are the black hats, the hackers who are really out to show what they're capable of. When it comes to that kind of a threat, is it a national threat? Is it a global threat? Is there any borders to this? And if, as I imagine, it is actually borderless, will the Philippine banking sector be up to standard and in compliance with what is evolving on the global stage as well?
It is a global issue. It's a global problem, Robbie. But in the same manner that we understand it's a global problem, our security is global in nature as well. So the moment you speak to our, enterprise-wide security, it is like speaking to those that are involved in the international spy movies about, all of this James Bond type of, I know someone who's doing this there, we can validate it, and so on. And so, I'm just floored by the amount of information that they have. This is what these are the kind of security, information security, players that are actually protecting us in the Philippines. They're not only locally adept, okay, but they also have partners that are former intelligence agents and familiar with the happenings in the dark world. They can even track down activities in the. It's like saying you see a financial crime transaction. Well, they're able to get the conversations. They're able to get the conversations of these underground individuals. I'm impressed.
Okay, you're impressed. We'll take some confidence from that. And I guess my final question lang, I'll bring it down to a more practical level. I don't need to talk to MI5 or CIA or all those international players that we put our confidence in. You're my James Bond right now. Simple question lang. With all of these fintech stuff coming up, whether it's an app, a service, or an anonymous text that I'm getting, what are the basic things? How do we know what's legit?
Very good question. The best way for you to know what is legit is to get in touch with your own financial institution. The moment you're asked, you receive an email, you receive an SMS, okay, asking you, or you even receive a call asking you to update your account, otherwise it is going to be closed or something else. Don't, don't panic. Don't fall into the view that your account is going to be closed, because we are not going to just all of a sudden call you out of nowhere to update accounts and allow you to have those kind of challenges.
Okay, well, for myself, I'd really like to thank Nicky and Wick. This has been so educational for me, very informative, but I want to hand off now to Manila House and Bambina. Bambina, over to you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much, Wick, our member, Wick Veloso, Robbie, also a member, and Nicky, hopefully you'll be a member soon. And also special shout out actually to G and Han Sikat for helping me put this together and giving me the great idea of putting Wick and Nicky together for this talk. It's been really, really illuminating, I think. And yeah, it touches on things that we're all like really concerned about. And I like the balance of there's a lot of things to be hopeful about, a lot of things to be a little cautious about, which is kind of the right way to go about things anyway, in the kind of world we're living in at the moment. So on that note, thank you again, everyone. I'm sure we've learned a lot today. The talk will be up on YouTube. Thank you for all of those who joined us on Facebook as well, as we were streaming live. And yes, any other questions, please, always, we're open to any questions you might have. If you'd like to see the presentations as well, and just give us a call anytime or drop us an email, events@manilahouseinc.com. Okay, thank you very much, and see you again soon. Next week, we have on the 26th at 2 p.m. We have a talk together with Akademyang Filipino about voting rights and polls, politicians, and promises, put it that way, that we will be talking about next week with Mar Mangahas, Richard Hederian, and William Yu joining us. So hope to see you then. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good rest of the afternoon and a good evening, and see you again soon.
Thank you.
And be safe online.
Okay. Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Bye.